Okay, so this will be the outline of what the workshop will cover today. You can take a look here and see what I'll be trying to cover. If I have time, after conditionals, I'll be covering on scanners and user inputs. Okay, so firstly, let's learn more about what is Java. So Java is a general purpose programming language, and this essentially means that Java can be run on many different platforms. So Java was created with the motto "Write once, run anywhere" in mind. It was developed and released in 1995, so it is quite an old language. And Java is also a high-level programming language. So contrary to what what you may gather from this phrase, it does not mean that Java is a very difficult language to learn. Rather, this means that the language is closer to human language. So it resembles human language more. So that would mean that it's actually easier to learn. Okay, and it's a very popular language. So you can take a look here at all the uses for Java. And you can slowly read on your own all the many different uses for Java. So one of the main uses that I'll highlight is for Android app development. So the main language for Android apps are actually written in Java. And I'm sure beyond these uses, you can probably think of other uses that Java is used for that I've not included. Okay, so now I'll be going through your set of your environment. So actually, I'll be talking about REPL.it first instead of Eclipse, because I think it's easier to set up compared to Eclipse. If you go to REPL.it, you can create an account here. And after you've created an account, towards the left, you should see languages. Click on this, and you click on Java. So this is a online REPL, which is a bit more convenient compared to having to download Eclipse. But for the rest of this workshop, I'll be using Eclipse as it is faster. Okay, so here you can name it whatever you want. I'll just use the preset name for it. Along this workshop, if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the chat. I'll try my best to answer. Okay, after it's finished loading, you should see this class main public static void blah blah. Not too important to know what they mean right now. For now, you can just know that this is your class and it's encapsulated within these two curly brackets, and this is your method. More specifically, is your main method, which is every line of code you write should be written inside here. If not, it will not execute properly. So not important to know what class and method mean, just know that it's called that. Okay, so for those who prefer to use Eclipse, you can double click on Eclipse and just use the default directory. Wait for it to start up. And over on the left, you can see create a Java project. The project name, you can call it anything, but for today's workshop, I'll just be calling it my first project. Okay, hit finish. For this module-info thing, you can just hit don't create. So on the left side, you should see your my first project package. If you expand it out, you'll see your JRE system library and your source folder. So right click on source, new, class. Now you give your class a name. So again, you can name it anything, but in this case, I'll just name it hello. So make sure to tick box. So this will create your main method as I've shown just now. And hit finish. And now you'll see all these lines of code, which is very similar to what you've seen just now. So your class and your main method. Okay, so going back to the slides, I'll be talking more about the one of the most essential part of programming, which is printing. Okay, so for printing, the printing is to essentially output something onto your console. So you'll see personally what that means later on. For the syntax or the vocab, it will look something like this. So system.out.println. Ln is short for line, so print line. Or you can use system.out.print. So both these will output something onto your console. But there is one small difference between the two, which I'll go through later on. So let's do the programming rite of passage. Okay, so within your main method, let's try typing out what I've shown just now. So system dot out dot print line, and make sure you have these open and close brackets. And now type out these double quotation marks. So what we want, why I'll go through a little bit more about what these double quotation marks mean later on, but just know for now that it is to denote what you're printing is a string. So and a string is basically words, sentences and whatnot. So it's within these double quotation marks, I'll type hello world with an exclamation mark. So now if you're using Eclipse, you will see that there's a red underline here, so which means there's probably some error. And the error is that I've not put a semicolon at the end of the line. So for any line you write in Java, you have to end it off with a semicolon. If not, it will just it will not know where your line ends, and you'll like keep searching for it. Then you'll get an error. So make sure to remember to always put a semicolon at the end of your lines. So now I can save. So Control S to save, and I can run. So if you look towards the top of Eclipse, there's a run. There should be a run near the top of REPL.it as well. So now you can see that I printed out hello world to my console. Okay, I'll give you all some time to try and do this. Okay. So now that we learned about printing, I'll share a bit more about data types and variables. So data types are essentially what's the data type of your value. So there are 5 main data types we'll be covering today. Do keep in mind that there is actually more than this, but these 5 are the basics ones we should know. Okay, so for int is just short for integer. So integers are any whole number from this range, and whole numbers are just numbers without like a floating decimal point. So it's like 1, 2, 3, but without any decimal points. So double are for very large and small numbers, and more importantly, there are numbers that have your decimal points. So take for example 1.0. So mathematically you know that 1.0 is the same as 1, but in Java there's actually a difference between the two, because 1.0 is a double since it contains the decimal point. Okay, next is your Boolean. So Boolean is a data type that can only consist of 2 values, your true and false. I'll be covering more in depth about Boolean later on when we move to conditions and control flow. So for char, it's short for character, and it's just a single character, like your A, B, C, even your numbers can be characters if you enclose them within single quotation marks. So remember that character is single quotation marks and string is double quotation marks. String is just a string of characters. So anything longer than one, like what we typed out, hello world is longer than one character. So it is considered a string, and it is always denoted by double quotation marks. Okay. So now that we know about data types, we can proceed to figure out data variable declaration. So you can think of variables like the store function in your calculator. So if you have a calculator, you can store values inside certain letters, like you can store the number one inside X, for example. So that's essentially what variables are about. So for example, I wanted to store the integer one into the variable X. So the format for assigning will look something like this. So you declare your data type. So so for example, in this case, I want to assign the integer one. So my data type is int. Now, next, you declare your variable name. So the name of the variable I want to store it into is X. So int X. And you set it to equal the value. So this will be the full line for if you wanted to store 1 into X. So int X equals to 1. And make sure you end off with a semicolon. So these variable names don't always have to be one letter long. You can put a string as your variable name as well. So for example, if I want to store the string hello into the variable name greeting, I'll first declare my data type, which is a string, and then I'll give my variable a name, so greeting, and the value hello. Okay, so now I'll be explaining how you can do this inside your code editor. Okay, so within Eclipse or within REPL, let's try typing out some of the examples earlier. So int X equals to 1. Okay, now I'm declaring that I'm assigning the value 1 to X. And to prove to you that it's actually stored inside X, within my print, I can now print X. Take note that I'm not putting X within double quotation marks now, because I'm not trying to print the string X or the character X. I'm trying to print the variable X. So now I hit Ctrl S to save and run. And instead of printing X, you can see that it will print out 1. So you can try this out you can try out the other examples, or you can just play around and assign whatever you want inside. So for example, what you've seen just now, I want to assign hello to greeting. So string greeting equals to, remember your double quotation marks, hello, and end off with a semicolon. And if I were to print out greeting, Control S to save and run, I'll get hello. Okay, so now you can play around with variable assignment while I talk a bit more about your flow in your Java code. So Java, like most programming languages, it runs from top down and left to right. So it'll execute the lines of code from the top first before moving on to the second line. So what this means is, for example, if I were to put this below my print, okay, and I deleted this, I will actually you'll see that it will be underlined in red, and I'll get an error because when the code is running, it comes down, it executes this line, and then it'll execute this line. And then it'll realize that I've not declared the variable greeting yet. And so it does not know what I'm trying to refer to at this point, even though I've declared it afterwards. So make sure when you're writing code, uh, try to make sure it makes sense, like it will run properly from top down. Okay. So I'll be moving on to operators now. So For operators, these are so the first type of operators we'll learn is the basic operators. So these will be your mathematical functions basically. A lot of it is quite self-explanatory. So plus is addition, minus is subtract, the asterisk is multiplication, so on and so forth. What you may not be familiar with is this percent sign thing. So this is actually called modulo. So instead of when you divide two numbers, instead of giving you the quotient, it will give you the remainder instead. So for example, I took 7 modulo 2. It will give me back 1 because 7 divided by 2 is a quotient of 3 and a remainder of 1. And your double asterisk will be to the power of. Okay, so let's move to Eclipse and we can try to use some of these operators. So let's declare another integer. So int y equals to 2. Okay, and we'll be trying to use some of the operators here. So for example, I wanted to add x and y together. So let me print out x plus y. So in this case, it should print out 3 because x is equals to 1 and y is equals to 2. And this should be 1 plus 2. So Control S and run. And you can see it will print out 3. Okay, so you can try using your other operators. So for example, I want to try using modulo. I'll set x to 6. 6 x modulo y. And this should give me 1. So save and run. Oh wait, no. X is 7. 6 divided by 2 should have a remainder of 2. That should have a remainder of 0. So yeah. Okay, so yeah, if I put x to 7 now and I 7 modulo 2, it'll give me 1. Okay, so you can use the plus operator in your print function to concatenate things. So to concatenate like strings. So what concatenate means is to add something to the end of or add something before. So for example, I had a string y that is greeting. Okay. So and I wanted to add the integer 7 to the end of it. If I were to do y plus x and run it, you see that it has added 7 to the end of y, which is greeting. Okay, then this will be useful. So for example, I wanted to print out my name. For example, I have a variable called name, and I'll put a random name here like Steve. And then inside my print line, I did hello, my name is something. And now I can add my name to the end of this string. So plus name. So what should output is this string, hello, my name is, and it'll add the variable name at the end of it. So if I run it, it'll print hello, my name is Steve. Okay, so moving past the basic operators, we have your relational operators. So these are operators to compare two values. So your double equals, two equal sign is to compare whether one is equals to the other. I think it's a bit hard to see from the slides itself. So for this portion, I'll just head straight to Eclipse and give you some examples. So for example, I put my int y back in. So if I put int y is also equal to 7, and I printed out x equals to y. So in this case, it's comparing between x and y and trying to figure out whether or not they are equal to each other. So if they are equal, it will return the Boolean value, as I mentioned, true. If they are not equal, then it will return false. So in this case, they are equal. So run. It will print true. And then looking back at the slides, we can try out the other operators. So exclamation mark equal is not equals to. So if we try in Eclipse, is x not equals to y? Obviously it's not because they're both 7. So it should print out false. It should print out false. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of these operators are again quite self-explanatory. So greater than, less than, greater than equal, greater or equal to, less than equal to. So you can try playing around with them and compare values. Okay, lastly we'll be going through logical operators. So this might be a bit confusing, but I'll try my best to explain them. So double AND is your logical AND, and the double straight line thingy, which you can find below your backspace, is logical OR. So what do I mean by logical AND and logical OR? Okay, so for logical AND, if the two Boolean values you're comparing are both true, then it'll ultimately evaluate to true. So just for illustration purposes, I did true and true. Then this will print out this whole line here will evaluate out as true. So Control S, run. So it will evaluate as true because both this and this is true. But if I had one of it as false, then this line here will evaluate as false because not both of these booleans are true. So now I run, it'll give me false. For the OR logical OR, it will evaluate this line as true as long as one of the conditions is true. So if either this or this is true, then it will ultimately evaluate as true. So in this case, I do have one that's true. So now if I run it, it'll print true. If they were both false, so neither this or this is true, it will now print true. It will now print false. Okay. So very rarely will you actually be using the literal Boolean value itself. Most of the time you'll be using the previous like comparative operators in this logical AND and logical OR. So for example, I set y to a value that's below x. So instead of typing false, you do x greater than y. So x greater than y will first evaluate to true because it is greater than y. And for this part, I'll put x less than y. And this portion will evaluate to false because x is not less than y. So since one of these two statements will give you true, this using the OR operator, it will ultimately evaluate this line as true, as you can see. But if I were to change this to an AND, because not both of these are true, it will give me false. Okay, and this will come in useful when I talk about control flow and conditions. Okay, so now I'll be teaching about the if statement. So an if statement will look something like this. If a condition is true, then the code within the curly brackets will execute. So if I go back to Eclipse here, okay, and I delete this. For example, I wrote if within these brackets and I put x greater than y, and then remember from the syntax, you must put these curly brackets. So if x greater than y, then the code within here will run. So the code I want to put inside here can be printing out x is greater than y. Okay, end of a semicolon. So since x is indeed greater than y, this condition is true, then this the code within the curly brackets will run. So save and run. And yes, it will run x is greater than y. But if this condition was false, so if I put x less than y, then this line will not run. So when I run it, nothing is output to the console. Okay, so now you can put an else statement after your if. So if something, then run this line of code. Else, if this is false, then it will run another line of code. So if that's a bit hard to understand, you can look at the flowchart. So given a condition or an expression, if it is true, then a statement in the if branch will run. If it is false, then the statement in the else branch will run. So we can try to do that here. So if x greater than y, then it'll print out that x is greater than y. But if else, then we can print out y is greater than x. So if I were to put y is greater than x, so let's say 8, the statement in the if branch will no longer run, and the statement in the else branch will now run. Okay, so yes, y is greater than x. Okay, then now I'll be talking about else if statements. So you can put these else if statements if you want to have multiple conditions to see if they are correct. So if this condition is true, then the statement in the if branch will run. Else if a new condition that you give is true, then the statement in this branch will run. And you can chain multiple else if statements together. So we can try doing this in our code. Yeah. So obviously if x greater than y, it does not mean that y is confirmed lesser than x. It could be that y is equals to x as well. So we can use an else if statement to check for that. So else if y, if x equal y, and then we print x is equal to y, and end off with a semicolon. And now you save and to illustrate the point that this will run if they are indeed equal, I'll change x to 8. So now it will go through the first branch, it will realize that x is not greater than y, so it won't run this. Then it will proceed to the next branch, and it will see that x is actually equal to y, so then it will run this. So if I save and run, it will print x is equal to y. Okay. So now since we have some time, I'll be explaining scanners and user input. So this portion may be a bit complicated as it touches somewhat into object-oriented programming, which is not too important to understand now, but I'll try my best to explain. Okay, so user input. So every time you go to, you try to log into your social media account, so you need to input a username, you need to input a password. So all this is known as user input. What scanners are is what you try to use to get this user input. So I'll just delete all the code here. Okay. Okay. So for this, okay, so to create a scanner object, I first need to declare, it's very similar to your variable declaration. So I need to declare that it is a scanner. Then now we need to give our scanner a name. So you can name it what you want. I'll just name it SC equals to new scanner. So this is trying to say that SC is equal to a new scanner object. So think of objects like your real life objects. So if I were to grab a random object right now, it would be my mouse. So my mouse has many functions. It can left click, it can right click, it can scroll up and down. So in Java, these objects are similar. They have many functions they can do. And in this case, your scanner object can scan for user input. So within this open close bracket, I want to type system.in. This to know that, let it know that you are scanning for input into the system. Okay, and end off with a semicolon. So now you see all these like red underlines and stuff, so you know something is wrong. And that's because we haven't imported. So if you're using Eclipse, you can hover over the red line and it'll give you like quick fixes. And you will want to click import scanner java.util. I don't think they have this feature in REPL. So unfortunately, you have to go above your class and type out, just copy out this line. So import java.util.scanner. So why do we have to do this? Like, okay, so you can think of it as if you're trying to import the blueprint to create a scanner. You want to create a scanner object, but you don't have the blueprint to create it. So many years ago, some guy wrote code to make a scanner, and instead of having to write this code over and over again after when we want to create a scanner, we just import what he wrote last time. And now we can use our scanner object SC. So so in order to like see all the functions your scanner has, you can type out the name of your scanner, SC dot, and you'll see drop drop down of all the different functions it has. So like my mouse can left click, right click, your scanner SC can close, delimiter, blah 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 blah. Most of these are not important to know now. And what I'll be showing is this function dot next open and close bracket. So what this does is you are using your SC, your scanner, to get the next line of user input. So if I were to just run this now, save and run, you can see that I can now type in my console, which I couldn't do before. So now it is scanning for user input. I can type whatever and then hit enter and it will be stored inside. It will be scanned. But this is not too useful because they're just scanning for the input and you're not storing it inside any variables. So we can use the variable declaration we learned earlier. So for example, I wanted to scan my name. So string name. Oh, I forgot to mention. So the .next function, it will scan the next input as a string. So whatever you input, it will always be uh it will always be a string. So for example, even if I entered an integer like 1, it will be scanned as a string, if that makes sense. So when you're declaring a variable name, it will you're declaring the data type, it will always be a string. So for example, string name equals to sc.next. If I save and run, I can put my name, Steve, and it will be stored within the variable name. So in order to show that, okay, this is a shortcut for if you're using Eclipse. You can type sysout with a capital S and do control space, autocomplete. Okay, so now I can print out my name. So print name, save and run. So if I type Steve, it will print back my name. Okay, so for example, okay, so for the user, if you just prompt them to enter something, it's not very meaningful because they don't know what they're supposed to enter. So you can actually put a print line before you scan for the input to like tell them what they should be inputting. So before the scan, I can do system.out.println, and I can ask them, what is your name? So when I save and run now, I did not put a semicolon. Okay, if I save and run now, it'll prompt me, what is your name? It'll print out this line first, so what is your name? And then it will scan for my input. So input Steve, and it'll print out Steve. To make it even more fancy, you can use the string concatenation you learned earlier. So within this line, instead of just printing our name, before that I can print hello, nice to meet you, and add name to the end of this string. So it'll print out hello, nice to meet you, whatever name you put at the end. So again, save and run. What is your name? Hello, nice to meet you. So with this, the amount of time we have left, I think I can go through making a simple program to calculate your BMI. So for example, you wanted to make a program that calculated out your BMI. The first things you want to get from the user to calculate is their weight, is their height. So firstly, I'll create my scanner. So scanner, sc goes to new, scanner, semicolon. Okay, I'll create a new scanner object. And now, the first time I scan, I want to scan for the, let's say weight, for example. So this weight is known as, this weight will likely be an integer. So instead of using sc.next, there's sc.next int. Oh wait, it's with a capital I. Next int. There's sc.next double. So for example, taking account what variable type, what data type you want to scan, you can put next and whatever data type. So this should work for basically every data type. So in this case, I want to scan the next integer, the user input. So next int. Okay, and this int, I want to store it inside the variable weight. So int weight equals to sc.next int. And now I'll print out a line before this to prompt them for their weight. So you can print enter your weight. Okay. So after you ask them for your weight, you will also need to get their height in order to calculate your BMI. So now system out of print line, and you ask them for their height. So enter your height. Okay, and below that, you take the height that they enter. Okay, so in this case, your height, for convenience sake, we'll just put it as an integer, even though a lot of the time it will be a double. But if you wanted to try taking the height as a double, you can just do double height equals to sc.next double. Actually, I'll just leave it as double. Okay. So now you have gotten your user's weight, you have gotten your user's height. So how do you calculate out the BMI? So now you can create a new variable int BMI equals to. So the formula for calculating BMI is weight divided by height squared, I think. Okay, and you can end it off with a semicolon. Okay, now you will see that I'll be getting a lot of error messages. So maybe you can try to think, why is this so? Okay. If it's not immediately apparent to you, it's because when I divide the weight if I divide the integer weight by the double height, I will not be getting an integer value back. I'll be getting another double value back. So I actually have to change this to double. And all your error messages should be gone now. Yes. Okay. Okay, so now you can try to print after all this, you want to print out the BMI of your user. So sys out your BMI is, and you'll add the BMI to the end. And now you try to run. Okay. Okay, not too sure why I'm getting an error message right now, but for just to quickly fix it, I'll just do height times height instead. So you can see in your program, I can enter my weight. So I'll just enter a random weight, 50 in kilograms. Now I can enter my height. So let's say I'm 1.5 meters. And it can now print out that my BMI is 22.2222. So in order to perhaps make this program a little better, I want my program to print out whether I am overweight, whether I'm obese, whether I'm healthy. So this is where your control flow comes in. So for example, if my BMI is greater than 25, I'm not sure if this is the correct number, but I'll just leave it as that for now. If my BMI is greater than 25, I want it to print out that you are overweight or you're obese. Okay. So below these if statements, I'll branch off to an else if. Else if BMI greater than 21 or something. You'll print out you are overweight. So looking at what we have so far, so from the BMI I calculated just now, 22, if we were to go through this control flow, so is 22 greater than 25? No, it's not. Then it will move on to the next else if. Is 22 greater than 21? Yes, it is. So now it will print you are overweight. And I can continue branching off BMI greater than or 18. It will print you are healthy. Okay. And lastly, if all of this is wrong, which means your BMI is less than or equals to 18, it will just mean you're underweight. So else you are underweight. Okay. So if you save and run now, so enter your weight. Let's give a different number this time. So 45. And my height is 1.8. So quite obviously this is underweight. So going through this workshop, is this the end? So this is a meme I stole from Reddit. So if you are looking at this and like smiling or laughing, chances are you probably know that this is not the end. In fact, it's just the tip of the iceberg for Java and programming in general. So this is not the end. Ignore the scanner user input at the part. There's actually a lot more you can learn if you're interested. So like arrays, loops, your maps and hash maps, and the object-oriented programming. If you're okay, hopefully after going through this workshop, you have gained a little bit of interest for Java and programming in general. So if you want to learn more, there are quite a lot of online interactive platforms to learn, like Codecademy and Udemy. I personally would recommend Codecademy because this is what I used to learn Java. And I think a lot of the practices they give online are quite useful. If you would rather watch someone else explain, there are some very good videos to watch. So this one by Free Code Camp is like 3 hours long, but there are timestamps you can skip to learn about individual things. And this playlist by Alex Lee, who explains a lot of the concepts in Java very well. Okay, we have come to the end of the workshop. I hope you have learned something new.